It's called The First Free Women, and it's a translation of the Therigatha, which is the collection of poems from the Pali Canon of the awakening poems of the first Buddhist nuns that we know of. I've heard that it's the first collection of women's poetry anthology that's known. So these poems for me have really spoke to the just the all-inclusive nature of the Dharma, and I always come back to that the Dharma invites us to include our entire lives in our practice. And so even things that we think maybe aren't included, or I'm not practicing when I'm feeling doubt, or I'm feeling fear, or I'm expressing anger, or that can't be practice, or these challenging relationships in my life can't be practice, um, or when my mind is so caught by anxious thoughts or planning, that can't be practice. And these poems show through these human beings, practitioners, nuns, direct experience that all challenge can be turned into wisdom. Uh, in the introduction, a current Theravada nun who helped the translator with this project of translating and bringing to life these poems says in her own words just how impactful this particular collection has been for herself to invite and include the more difficult emotions and see the wisdom and compassion that can be opened through the inclusive nature of the Dharma. So I always like to start just by expressing that, because I think each poem brings that element to life for me of, yes, include this too, include this too, include this too. Right now at the monastery and in ZCO online, we're investigating Dogen Zenji's fascicle called Continuous Practice. It's our theme for the fall practice period. And I love that phrase. And that's exactly what these poems have brought to life for me of one, the investigation of what is continuous practice, what continues moment by moment by moment. I also like the word ceaselessness. And so that just that continuous investigation, like, is this practice too? Is this practice too? As we move about and encounter both the joys and the struggles of living a human life. So it really opens um, the window, the door of what zazen, what the spiritual path actually is, can be. Invitation to include the whole of our lives. So I like to read one poem from this collection and share uh, some of the Dharma teachings that I see in this poem. And this poem is by a woman ancestor named Genta, and that name translates as conqueror. You can hold that word in your heart through this talk. What has she conquered? What is being conquered? Um, as I read this poem, these poems are very rich and have a lot of direct pointing to the nature of experience, the nature of mind. They're both universal and very particular. So I invite you just to like open your heart, clear your mind, and hear each line, each word, and see if any particular phrase resonates for you. I won't have time enough to talk about every single phrase, but I want to give you the opportunity to enter this poem and this teaching, and maybe pocket a line or two or a word that you can carry with you from Genta. So Genta says, I was forever getting lost. I was forever getting lost until one day the Buddha told me to walk this path. You will need 7 friends: mindfulness, curiosity, courage, joy, calm, stillness, and perspective. To walk this path, you will need 7 friends, the Buddha said: mindfulness, curiosity, courage, joy, calm, stillness, and perspective. For many years, these friends and I have traveled together, sometimes walking in circles, sometimes taking the long way around. There were times I thought I could not go on. There were times I thought I could not go on. There were times I thought I was finally beaten. It's scary. It's scary to give all of yourself to just one thing. What if you don't make it? Oh, my heart, you do not have to do this alone. Train yourself to train just a little more gently. Train yourself to train just a little more gently. That's the poem by Genta. So I want to zoom in and explore some of the lines from this poem, and pull out some of the Dharma teachings. Like I said, this poem is rich, so you may have had a very different interpretation or experience of the poem, and that's great. There's so many lenses that we can look at because these teachings are very rich and personal and have many sides. So the one line that I want to explore is this invitation to have, cultivate, befriend these 7 qualities of the heart. And she named these 7 qualities um, in the poem, and these 7 qualities are the Buddha's teaching on the 7 factors of awakening. And this teaching you can find sprinkled in the Pali Canon. Actually, the Buddha gave the 7 factors of enlightenment teaching to his chief disciple, Mahakashyapa, when Mahakashyapa was sick. He said, oh, remember these qualities of your mind. And it said that Mahakashyapa turned his mind to those qualities. And then on another time, the Buddha was sick and asked one of his chief disciples, who was at his side at the time, to give him the teachings of the 7 factors of awakening, to remind him of those qualities. And it said that one of the monks did so. I can't remember off the top of my head who it was. And then the Buddha found equanimity with the sickness. So these words that were used in the poem aren't necessarily the words that are always translated. So mindfulness, curiosity is sometimes translated as inquiry or investigation. Calm is sometimes translated as serenity. Courage is virya, which is energy. Um, joy is sukha, that's the Pali, and that's also means happiness. And that's like a very subtle form of happiness that can arise through meditation. Stillness is translated as samadhi, which is translated sometimes as concentration in our um, English language, absorption, unity, all aspects of what samadhi means. And then perspective is equanimity, sukha, no, upekkha. So, one aspect of these teachings of the seven factors of awakening is that these are qualities in our own hearts. These are qualities, the qualities of an awakened heart, you can say, or I've been saying recently, resilient heart. That really resonates for me right now. I started really investigating this poem and the teachings of the seven factors of awakening leading up to the election, and was doing talks with um, our group, our Sangha, and just seeing like how crucial the development and the getting to know and the befriending of these qualities is for having resiliency in the face of anxiety and change and deep uncertainty. So one aspect is the aspect of bringing them online, and so that has two dimensions. One is perhaps noticing, well, what gets in the way from me recognizing these qualities. So, what can be let go of, what obstructs my ability to access joy or equanimity or calm? And another is to water them. So, I guess the first would be to weed, if you want to use a garden analogy, to weed out or see through what obstructs, the polish the mirror, another analogy. And the other is to water those qualities, the seeds of those qualities, by practicing them. I mentioned Dogen Zenji's fascicle continuous practice, and in that fascicle, one of the core teachings that's right in the beginning, Dogen Zenji says, between aspiration, practice, enlightenment, and nirvana, there is not a moment's gap. I really, really love that teaching. It's very deep. I've been contemplating it for the past couple of months and really seeing that in terms of what I'm talking about with the seven factors, that having the aspiration to be mindful is in that moment turning the mind towards mindfulness. And so you're practicing mindfulness and you're realizing, actualizing, becoming enlightened to the quality of mindfulness. Just and that happens moment by moment. So we have the intention towards um, practicing joy or recognizing joy in our lives, and then that moment of even aspiring is bringing joy towards the forefront or looking for joy, and that immediately is the practice of joy, which is actualizing joy. And so it's that simultaneity, which is very interesting for me. And I invite you to practice and know that in your own experience. Like when you set an intention before a meditation period, or when you wake up, I don't know if you do this, but setting an intention for the day. And then you in that moment are actualizing that intention, and it begins to become a familiar rut in the minds, a path that the mind orients towards and goes down, and um, is sprinkled throughout the day, or becomes a trustworthy path. Another angle, though, of this teaching of the seven factors of awakening, or the seven friends of a resilient heart, is that it's developmental, that it that one leads to the other, leads to the other, leads to the other. And I think this is how it's traditionally taught in the Pali Canon. And so it's interesting just to consider those. The Zen way is the way I just presented, that aspiration, practice, enlightenment, nirvana, there's not a moment's gap. The moment of mindfulness is the fulfillment of mindfulness. It's good to have that perspective as Zen practitioners, to know that truth, the nature of mind, contains all of these qualities. And the other side is developmental. We are maturing and evolving in our practice. And to look for these qualities as we develop concentration, as we practice in daily life. So I'll go through and give just a little bit of my understanding of each of the qualities, and invite investigation for yourself into your experience with these qualities, because like I said, we all are familiar with them on some level. And see, maybe as we journey through this path of the 7 factors of awakening, see how they could unfold into each other in a period of meditation, or even as you're setting up your meditation, and throughout situations in your life. So first is mindfulness. And what I've heard is, the Buddha said, well, you need mindfulness even to recognize any of these qualities. And so, mindfulness in our culture is beautifully defined as um, just that bare being with direct experience without judgment. And that's a really important, crucial definition and practice of mindfulness. And mindfulness traditionally also meant recollection, remembering. So the quality of mindfulness here has both that remembering to return, remembering practice. And in that remembering, you reconnect with the fundamental truth of your life. And that was like a really wordy way to say present moment experience. You connect to the here and now. Mindfulness is an invitation, a remembering to remember. I really love that phrase. That's from Native American traditions. The remembering to remember is a making this moment sacred, turning attention here, being present. And so that remembering, that presencing of our lives then allows for a decision or an orientation towards one of these factors of awakening. And let's go in the traditional order. So, mindfulness, remembering, we return, reconnect to this body, this heart, this mind, what's happening here and now. And then the next invitation is towards curiosity. And so in meditation, this makes sense. Like, you get present, and this can happen even in the midst of a meditation period. You notice the mind's wandered, you remember the practice, return to present moment experience, and then turn on interest, curiosity. This is a quality that allows the mind to begin to rest and stay in present moment experience with whatever your subject of meditation is. And so curiosity is some way I like to think of it as zooming in. That word zoom that's so popular in our lives right now, or getting closer, or getting intimate, or like becoming a connoisseur of experience. Like really getting to know the breath, if that's the subject of meditation, and the temperature changes, and the space between the sensations, and how long the breath is, and just really getting into the details. And if it's sound, it's like opening to the whole field of sound, as if you're immersed in a beautiful musical experience. And if you're in a challenging situation, it's an invitation to bring curiosity to that experience. And so, if it's a difficult emotional experience, getting curious about um, the content and texture and coloring of a mood in the heart. And if it's a difficult conversation, becoming curious about the other person and their perspective and really listening. And so, this quality of curiosity isn't just about meditation, but it's bringing presence and intimacy into all areas or aspects of our lives and our experiences. It's an invitation to really be here. There's a woman in our Sangha who just recently started experiencing really severe levels of pain. She's been a dancer her whole life and is only in her 50s, and there's this just mysterious pain that's preventing her from dancing. And she's a long-term practitioner. And what was interesting, she was describing her experience in a cohort group during Ango, and she just kept saying, um, yeah, I can't dance anymore. And there was obvious like sadness there. And then she says, but it's so interesting because I'm learning and I can't sit the way I used to sit anymore. And I used to wake up really early and I would do 2 hours of practice. I can't do that anymore. I need more sleep, but it's so interesting because I'm learning. And she just kept doing that, like just teasing out her experience with this quality of investigation. Well, it's so interesting. That could be our entrance into curiosity. Oh, what's interesting about this moment, this difficult situation? What is interesting? What can I learn from it? So curiosity can shift into courage, and we're already exploring that as I talked about um, the Sangha member who's experiencing a lot of pain. It takes courage to stay in direct experience. Remembering this teaching, I feel very validated or affirmed, like that this is challenging. It's challenging to stay in direct experience, whether it's direct experience of meditation, whether it's a difficult emotion arising, whether it's a difficult situation, whether it's just living a human life, just whether it's living your human life. It takes courage to be present with the experience of being human, the the textures, the nuance, the difficulties, the fears um, that arise. And so, this courage, and I love the word courage because it means with heart, comes from the shares the root of heart. And so, it's an invitation to be in the heart with our lives, to move into the heart, to live from the heart. And that is an enactment of faith. The faith it takes to really stay with the challenges. Courage is an invitation into deep acceptance, and courage to stay. And the courage to stay allows for, and we only can know this through direct experience, but it allows for things to transform. The courage to just stay, even when resistance is present, and to allow for things to transform. And it also allows for the next skillful decision. So sometimes the next skillful decision is to move, right? If you're sitting with pain and it's getting too intense. But the courage, which allows for acceptance, allows for that next moment to come from compassion instead of reactivity, which is a very big difference. It has a very big um, difference in terms of repercussions or effects when I move from compassion versus when I move from reactivity or anger. And so that invitation into the heart is also an invitation to move from compassion. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience in meditation. It might be the more subtle form of it, but as you stay with um, a difficult experience or boredom or something, um, or just stay with the breath in meditation, subtle joy can arise. And I remember this just in a like, oh wow, it's actually satisfying to be with resistance. And that's an aspect of joy. Like when I'm actually really with my resistance and not strategizing how to get rid of it or how to be more comfortable or um, trying to push it away, if I just really actually feel it, there's something really, it sounds funny, but pleasurable about it or enjoyable about it. And so I'm using the word invitation a lot, I notice, but I feel like these teachings of the seven factors of awakening are invitations for us to explore in our own direct experience. What happens when I courageously stay with my life? Is it a more joyful life? And I also see this quality as joy as so important for our own resiliency in our lives. And so I notice for myself that joy and turning towards joy is an active practice. And what I mean by that is finding joy even when the mind is anxious or disastering, just thinking about all the possible things that could go wrong, or planning, or just in reactivity. Is there joy? Can I open to joy in my direct experience? Can reactivity and joy coexist? Can fear and joy coexist? Can anxiety and joy coexist? And what I find is when I ask myself that question, or I look, well, is there joy? And just ask that question. Okay, I feel anxious, but what brings me joy right now? And it's not like turning off the anxiety necessarily. It's just inviting a fuller experience of my life, like that I hadn't been tuned into, to come up, to be lived. That joy can exist in struggle, and to plant the seeds and to cultivate joy brings us a certain kind of buoyancy and resilience to our lives. So knowing and being willing to feel joy. And joy, I'm like, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Like when I think about joy now, it's like, oh yeah, that subtle sensation at my nostrils right now, that's satisfying. That is a subtle form of happiness. Or, for me, it's also the natural world. Like if I walk outside and see the fall leaves, or the sky and all the dynamic weather that flows through the skies in Oregon, especially where we live on off of the Columbia River, that can bring me so much joy and can coexist with whatever else is going on. And then, so those three qualities, curiosity, courage, and joy, are uplifting qualities. So when we're thinking about meditation, there's energizing aspects of meditation, and then there's also the calming aspects of meditation. So the next three qualities have more of the calming nature, and the first one is calm. And you can also, I invite you to investigate this in your meditation practice. That let's talk about joy for a moment as satisfaction. And so staying with the breath or boredom or a difficult experience And the satisfaction that might arise from that can lead to or open up an experience of deeper calm, or help us get in touch with the part of ourselves that is calm. So that's one aspect in meditation practice, that how these factors kind of weave together a path. You would say a path towards perspective or equanimity or wisdom. And then also, just like joy, I have to remind myself sometimes to notice calm. And I feel like most of us have this experience actually pretty regularly of taking the meditation seat, and even if the whole time you're sitting, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour, you're thinking about the future planning, or I'm thinking about the future planning, my mind's anxious, thinking about my day. When I get up, there's a deeper sense of calm than when I sat down, because the intention there was to cultivate stillness or equanimity or loving kindness, whatever my intention was. And I took the posture, and I wasn't feeding through body movements my reactivities. So even if the mind is going, there is often an experience of calm, sometimes not even palpable or noticeable, or sometimes we notice it hours later. Like, oh, I'm so much more calm in this situation than I normally am. Oh, maybe it was because I sat this morning. And then another invitation is to notice the calm even in the midst of anxiety or planning or difficulty or a thought storm. Like, is there a part of us that is calm? And can you tune into it? And that naturally shifts into the next factor, which is stillness or samadhi, concentration, absorption. So in meditation, the mind begins to calm, the body begins to calm, the heart begins to calm. And we have moments of just being breathed, just hearing, just sitting. And that's that unified moment, body, mind, environment, all one. And then another aspect of stillness is there, and so we take the posture of stillness in meditation, but is stillness an aspect of experience that you can tap into? The all pervasive stillness. I also like the word spaciousness or quiet. And this quality of stillness includes movement. It's the stillness below the breath, below the heartbeat, the body's fundamental stillness that allows for all the sensations to arise, all the thoughts to arise and return and express and return to stillness. And in quiet periods of meditation, maybe we can see that happening on a really subtle level. And it's something we can tune ourselves into even in the midst of activity. There's a beautiful koan image, an immovable tree and a heavy wind. What is immovable when the tree is going really just responding? What is immovable in us when we're just responding to the busyness of a day, of a life, the activity of service and caring for kids and working and all the other things that fill a day? Can you know that immovability, like a tree knows that immovability, even as it is buoyed around by the winds and rains? Another poetic image I heard today from Harada Roshi was a storm sweeps through the sky, and the sky is unchanged. The sky remains still. Another image I like from the Zen tradition is the one who is not busy. And you can turn that into um, the one who is not anxious. When you're anxious, is there an aspect of my experience that is not anxious? Is there an aspect of my experience that is not busy, is not sick? And then perspective or equanimity. And equanimity for me has three aspects. One is a steadiness, one is peace, and the third one is perspective, the ability to hold and shift into different perspectives, which we've been talking about as we looked at joy and the ability to hold both joy and fear at the same time, and calm and panic at the same time, and stillness and movement. So, um, equanimity gives us the ability to step into different views, to know all the different voices within ourselves. Also gives us the opportunity to see the emptiness of thought. So, if we're looking at it in a more progressive way, as we get in touch with the stillness of mind, the spaciousness of mind, seeing thought arise and dissolve, and seeing that all thoughts do that. Thoughts of resistance, thoughts of boredom, thoughts of love, thoughts of peace, thoughts of deep care, they all arise and disappear into the same stillness of being, the same spaciousness of being, the nature of mind. All thoughts have the same nature. So that can open up the possibility of stepping into different perspectives without having to own it as ultimate truth. So, can I step into the perspective of somebody I'm having a difficult conversation with, and can I see from their point of view? And then can I see from my point of view? And then can I see from a third point of view that isn't being represented, without saying that any one of them is ultimately true? And another way of working with that is when I feel really fixed in a certain belief, asking, oh, what else is true? Is there more? Is there more perspective that I can have on this single issue? Those are our 7 friends. I invite you to make friends with them. And how do you make friends? It's another aspect of this poem. How do you make friends with your own mind, right? This is making friends with your own mind, with your own heart. And what is friendship? And friendship takes, and we all have experience of making friends and cultivating friends and having long friendships. And what qualities allow for friendships to exist over time? Spending time with them, right? Paying attention, being willing to pay attention. So, spending time with these 7 factors of awakening, getting to know them, paying attention to them, how they show up in our lives already, right? Because they aren't necessarily something we need to make happen in our experience, but there's something that is there and functioning all the time. So, recognizing them gives them life. And cultivating friends means being vulnerable and not knowing what these qualities are, being willing to experience joy in many, many different ways, or experience calm in many, many different ways, and staying open, not concluding. These friends allow us to walk the path of our lives, as Genta says, to meet the doubts and to keep walking. She says, sometimes we walk in circles. Sometimes we take the long way around. And if you're walking in circles with friends, and if you're taking the long way around with friends, it's good company. It's not a problem. And she says, we will meet our doubts. Part of this path is part of living human life is not, really not knowing if we can go on, feeling beaten, feeling despair, feeling discouraged. And then there's mindfulness, the opportunity to remember, oh, I have these friends. She also reminds us you don't have to do it alone. You have these friends in here that we're cultivating, these 7 friends that are making friends with our own heart. And we have friends on the path. We have Sangha who are also cultivating their own hearts. And so to take refuge in that friendship on the path is so crucial. I was just thinking, if I wasn't friends with Mushin, I wouldn't be sitting meditation tonight because it's my night off at the monastery. But since I'm friends with Mushin, I agreed to do this, and I'm really grateful. I was sitting tonight and I was like, I'm so grateful that I'm practicing right now. And yeah, what we'll do for our friends. And as we make friends with ourselves, and I think this is just so beautiful, we learn more about what friendship is, and then we're better friends to our Sangha members, to our family, to our friends in our lives. So thank you. Thank you all for your presence, your practice, and your friendship.